This is Father Jonathan Meyer, and in the last few hours and days, I've received several emails with parishioners asking questions about how members of the Society of St. Pius X have excommunicated themselves, and for me to explain what happened and what this means. So there's a deep history here, but yes, on July 1st, there was an ordination of bishops that was not given approval by the Pope. That is a grave, grave act. That is a moral act that causes a break, a sever, a schism, because we believe in an apostolic church. You can't have an apostolic church unless you continue the unbroken tradition, which is what we have, of bishops being approved by the Pope. It is the Pope who chooses, selects bishops, and in fact, for a bishop to be ordained, there needs to be two other bishops that are present. So the way that we guard apostolic succession is very important. And as I explained in this video, we'll see that was blatantly disregarded. And there was no permission for these bishops to ordain new bishops. And so because they acted in this way, they imposed upon them an automatic excommunication. And now the Vatican has actually come out and clarified some further excommunications and disciplines that go along with that. So I want to start with the history, because this goes way, way back. This is not just about what happened on July 1st, and it's not about what happened on June 29th, and it goes very, 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 very far back. This goes back to the 1960s, the early 1960s. The Second Vatican Council is called, and there are individuals who are struggling with things that are coming out of the Second Vatican Council. There particularly was an Archbishop Meyer Lefebvre, and he was from France, and he was very alarmed by things that were being said and did not like it. So in 1970, with permission of his local bishop, he founded the Society of St. Pius X. So we're still doing great here. We're still all in union with the Pope, and everything's doing great, right? And so he founded this Society of St. Pius X in Switzerland. And it was an international society, and they had seminarians, and they were given granted permission to continue to celebrate the extraordinary form of the Mass, which is the Latin Mass. And they were preserving what they believed was a way for them to continue to practice their faith according to their conscience and to what they believed was good. Okay. Then in the late 1970s, there becomes to be a lot of tension is growing because Archbishop Lefebvre starts ordaining priests without permission from Paul VI. So this happens particularly actually 50 years ago, the year that I was born. Paul VI had said, do not ordain priests. Archbishop Lefebvre started ordaining priests, which then, of course, causes a lot of tension, right? Then this ultimately leads to more conflict. And then in 1988, Archbishop Lefebvre ordained other men bishops. This is on June 30th, 1988. And this ultimately then received the penalty of excommunication. This is exactly what happened on July 1st, this past week. So this already happened in 1988, right? They received the penalty of excommunication. And then what's happened is that over the years, the popes have tried to bring the Society of St. Pius X back into the church and to give them, a bridge to be in communion with the church that Christ founded, which they believe that they are, and they believe that they're continuing to preserve that union, but then they continue to do acts that are blatantly against the Supreme Pontiff of the Holy Roman Catholic Church. So Pope Benedict XVI, and I mean this like, I have a lot of love for all of our popes, but Pope Benedict XVI went out of his way to extend on multiple times opportunities for the Society of Pius X to be reconciled. Ultimately, at one point, he lifted the excommunications of the bishops that had been ordained back in 1988. So those men are now in union with the church. Permission was given that their marriages and their confessions would be valid. And so this is like, that was done by Pope Francis in 2016. So that's like I just look at it as like the church was doing everything she could. Our Holy Fathers, the Pope, were doing everything they possibly could. Pope Benedict XVI tried to promote the extraordinary form of the Mass and even like encourage the Society of St. Pius X to become a religious community or a religious order. All of that was rejected again and again and again. When Traditionis Custodes came out in 2021, that clearly caused a divide and a rupture, and the Society of Pius X was very, very upset and more boldly rejected the Second Vatican Council, which then leads ultimately to what happened in these last few days. So they had publicized the fact that they were going to ordain these men, really in many ways doing exactly what they had done in 1988, even though that we had lifted their excommunications. We had given them, Pope Francis given the faculty to hear confessions and their marriages would be valid, and they intentionally, blatantly ordained these men without permission from the Pope. The Pope wrote them a beautiful letter on June 29th, the Solemnity of Saints Peter and Paul, begging them to turn back. Please turn back, he says. He actually quotes, he speaks of his paternal heart. And so then in Switzerland, again, these men are ordained, and that ultimately, we didn't excommunicate them, they excommunicate themselves. It's an automatic excommunication that is given to them. And then on July 2nd, which is today, the Vatican has come out and has made it very, very clear that these men committed excommunication upon themselves, but now St. Pius X has broken communion with the Pope and has entered into a state of formal schism, and that ultimately invalidates the sacrament of confession, the sacrament of marriages that would be done by a priest from Society of St. Pius X, and then also a strong warning has been given to the lay faithful that those who formally adhere to the Society of St. Pius X would be considered schismatics and can risk automatic excommunication themselves. So this really is a very, very sad day. In some ways, we can look at it and say, we've been doing everything we can to try to bring you into the fold, but you keep refusing, you keep rejecting, and so in some ways, like, it's nothing new because there hasn't been a movement on their part, and what they did on the first really is a continuation of what they have done dating back to 1988 and before that. But it really is an affront to apostolic tradition. It's an affront to the fact that our church is apostolic in nature, rooted in the truth, the tradition, and obedience to the successor of the apostles. And this group is now out there on their own, ordaining, making decisions in defiance of our Holy Father and in defiance of the tradition of the church. So a day for us to pray for unity, a day for us to pray for communion, a day for us to pray, not just a day, but to pray that God's will be done. I just want to make just some observations here at the end. This is not about individuals that have a love for the extraordinary form of the Mass. So in our local area, we have a parish down the road, a chapel down the road of St. Philomena in Oak Forest, St. Cecilia, St. Philomena. In Cincinnati, there is, I'm going totally blank, Old St. Mary's. And these are two places, like locally right here in Indianapolis, you would have Our Lady Queen of the Most Holy Rosary, where the extraordinary form of the Mass is celebrated. That is a good thing. That is a beautiful thing. That is the tradition of the Church. And in fact, the Society of the Fraternity of St. Peter was founded in the days of St. John Paul II as a way to continue the art and the beauty and the love of the extraordinary form of the Mass. What is happening with Pius X society is not the people that attend the extraordinary form of the Mass that are offered by a diocesan priest like Father Jerry Bird at Our Holy Rosary, or an Oratorian at Old St. Mary's like Father John Paul, or the priests from the Fraternity of St. Peter at Oak Forest. This has nothing to do with them. This has nothing to do with them. They are good, faithful priests, and this is not about the Latin Mass. This is not about being a traditional Catholic. This is not about someone who wears a cassock or someone who likes the liturgy or someone that, no, this is about a blatant disregard for apostolic tradition, a blatant disregard for obedience to our Holy Father, a blatant disregard for working with and in the confines of a family. That's what this is about. And so I don't want people to think that, that just because someone loves the liturgy or loves traditional liturgy or reverent liturgy, that then makes them somehow, part of this group, right? And in fact, those congregations particularly, and those who celebrate the Mass reverently, are going to have to become homes for individuals who realize the severity of what the society has done and will actually leave the society because they are actually true faithful Catholics. And they realize that the pride and the division that is being caused here is not of God. And so they will actually have to come, and many of them will want to come to the extraordinary form, so they will come to these places looking for reverent liturgy, looking for a Mass that they can pray at in a very beautiful way, looking for valid confessions, looking for valid marriages. And so we need to pray also for these particular congregations that they find a beautiful home there. And I would also just say, particularly here at All Saints, we celebrate, I believe, a very reverent Mass. We have chanting and incense and servers, and we celebrate Mass in a very reverent and beautiful way. And so we all need to be one. We all need to be to find a place where we can call home. So anyways, I hope that helped explain a little bit about what's happening, and there is much for us to pray for, but we are people, we pray every day at the Holy Eucharist for the Pope. His name is in the Eucharistic prayer, and we do that for a reason. And that's actually a way for you to know that because you hear his name being prayed, that you know that you are in union with the Church, which is the one Church, which is the bride of Christ, founded upon the apostles. So let's pray for union, let's live in union, and let's be the saints that God is calling us to be.